Just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the Defense of Marriage Act and conservatives' support for it. The Constitution has something called the Full Faith and Credit Clause, which basically says that any contract entered into in one state has to be recognized in another state. Traditionally, this has meant that marriages, divorces, things like that have to be recognized in all 50 states, regardless of which state they come from. There have been a few decisions, constitutional decisions from the U.S. Supreme Court that have cemented this precedent throughout history. One of them was from Nevada. As most of you may know, Nevada actually has pretty liberal divorce laws. And I won't get into the history behind that too much, but suffice to say, they initiated these laws because they were a small state losing population, and they wanted people to come to their state. And that and legalized gambling were two of the things that they legalized to make this happen. So other states refused to recognize these divorces because they had less permissive divorce laws, especially in the South and I'm sure the Midwest. The Supreme Court ruled that other states have to recognize these decisions. I think we need to take this precedent, along with other precedents, when it comes to interracial marriages too. As you know, or may not know, in 1967, I believe, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously struck down bans on interracial marriages. However, what most people don't know before that was that interracial marriages entered into one state, mostly northern states, had to be recognized in other states. That's my understanding, at least. In Loving versus Virginia, obviously, which was an affront to that decision, they ruled that not only did that marriage have to be recognized, but they had an equal right to engage in interracial marriage. Now, kind of fast forward to where we are right now. We've got different states. I think we have now 17 states that recognize either same-sex marriages or civil unions. And we have a law in place, DOMA, which makes it illegal for the federal government to either recognize same-sex marriages or for other states to recognize these marriages too. Now, the Full Faith and Credit Clause of the Constitution does guarantee that contracts entered into one state have to be recognized. Now, gay couples actually tend to draw up papers. They spend a few $1,000s to draw up papers for wills, hospital visitation, things like that. And when they cross state lines, they take these papers with them because they know that other states have to recognize these contracts. My question is, why would this be any different with marriage? It shouldn't be, and I think there's a lot of precedent behind that. There's also a lot of precedent behind the federal government actually having to recognize all marriages conducted in different states. These are actually two separate clauses in the Defense of Marriage Act. Section 3 states that the federal government will only recognize opposite gender marriages. The rest of it actually says that other states don't have to recognize same-sex marriages from other states. So, my point of this is that true conservatives always bring up the Constitution, and they bring up constitutional law. They don't always agree with precedent, but even conservative lawyers and in general conservative justices tend to follow precedent. Well, I think that it's very obvious in this case that DOMA is unconstitutional. You can't say that just because there's a law passed by Congress that it overrides the Constitution, that certain states shouldn't recognize other marriages from other states. There's absolutely no precedent for this in law. It's absolutely unconstitutional. And it's obviously discriminatory, which is a whole other issue under the 14th Amendment. So anyway, that's just my kind of spiel on it. Anyway, this is my first video blog, so just a little bit about myself. I live in St. Charles, Missouri, which is about 25 miles outside of St. Louis. So I basically live in St. Louis, and I've been interested in politics for a while. I do a lot of chatting and blogging and things like that, but this is my first real upload on this. So if it's kind of spotty and kind of incoherent, that's probably okay for my first time. So anyway, that's what I think, and hopefully I didn't leave too much out. Anyway, that's it. Thank you. Just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the Defense of Marriage Act and conservatives' support for it. The Constitution has something called the Full Faith and Credit Clause, which basically says that any contract entered into in one state has to be recognized in another state. Traditionally, this has meant that marriages, divorces, things like that have to be recognized in all 50 states, regardless of which state they come from. There have been a few decisions, constitutional decisions from the U.S. Supreme Court that have cemented this precedent throughout history. One of them